as a CISO, you have to be on your front foot to think of kind of what's out there, what's potential hole you may have in your security posture. So it's crucial to keep yourself fresh and learn of the latest technologies and companies. And CISO can be a gatekeeper, but also an enabler, for many of these early stage companies to get into the enterprise.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Andrei Brasoveanu. Andrei is a partner at the venture capital firm Accel. He's been with the firm for a decade and invests in enterprise software, developer-oriented software, open source, security, financial services, and Web3 crypto. A Romanian by birth, Andrei came to the US for university and graduate school, and also lived and worked in America for a stretch before relocating back to Europe. He backs entrepreneurs who are largely based in Europe as well as in Israel. I look forward to speaking with him primarily in this conversation around cybersecurity, an evergreen topic that always seems to grow in complexity. I look forward to hearing how he thinks about the cyber landscape and what he looks for in founders he backs. Andrei, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Thank you, Peter, for having me.
It's a pleasure. Well, Andrei, you are a partner at Accel, a firm you joined 10 years ago. I wonder if you could take a moment and describe Accel's business, if you would.
Of course. We're one of the leading venture capital firms, actually in our 40th year now. We've had the pleasure of partnering with early stage entrepreneurs very much since inception. And over the years, we've built our muscle to support founders until IPO and beyond. And these days, we operate from our teams and offices in Palo Alto, London, and Bangalore with a global footprint and keen to find the very best teams wherever they may be.
That's excellent. And talk a bit about your own areas of focus. What technologies or what theses are you operating against?
Yeah, so by background, before Accel, I used to work in high frequency trading as a quant. And naturally, I was drawn to the world of infrastructure and had a deep passion of understanding of what's under the hood. And here at Accel for the past 10 years, I've been focusing on backing technical teams, naturally in the areas of cyber, infrastructure, data. I'm also based in London, and many of the teams I back originate in Europe or Israel. But given the nature of these sectors, they pretty quickly find their wings and move to the US. And a lot of our work is helping these teams build their go-to-market in the States and build global businesses.
And I know a key principle of Excel is the prepared mind. Can you talk a bit about what that means and how you apply that very principle?
The gist of the prepared mind is that you don't meet a founder to have them educate us on their business, but rather by the time we meet a founder, we will have had a reasonable context around the area they're developing in. We may have a good understanding of what the right technology approaches are, the right paths to success or not. And certainly we're open-minded towards being shown the light. And we all know that amazing founders have the ability to look around corners and identify promising markets before they're obvious. But we do a lot of prep work ahead of time before meeting a founder. It also means that we tend to be very focused on certain areas. So as I mentioned, cyber or developer tools, software more broadly, these are areas we've been investing across each technology cycle. And it's very helpful to have that pattern recognition and depth in a sector to be able to re-identify when something is special. On a day-to-day basis, the way that's relevant in my work is that, for example, in cyber or infra, it's helpful to have a deep understanding of the IT stack, understand the kind of what the current tool set is in an enterprise, such that you can have a much more clear picture of what the wedge of a potential solution may be, and what the right path to winning a market.
And you mentioned, Andrei, that you're based in London. Can you talk a bit about, geographically speaking, your areas of focus and what excites you about those areas?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Being based in London means you become a gold member on many airlines pretty quickly. We're based in London, but most of our work is spanning the whole continent as well as Israel. I would say probably 20% of our work is centered in the UK, and then with equal proportions in Germany, France, Tel Aviv. It has its benefits and let's say challenges. On one hand, it's super exciting that you get to meet founders from many different cultures. I would say there's no common archetype of what makes a successful founder when you look at this continent. You have repeat teams, of course, but you also have many folks right out of college, coming out of technical universities. So you have to keep an open mind. And some of the challenges are very much in terms of coverage, right? We're always on our front foot, beating the pavement, trying to find the next best team, as opposed to sitting in our office and waiting for folks to come pitch us.
Well, maybe we begin with cyber as a category that obviously you focus an awful lot on, as you mentioned. Talk a bit about the evolution of cyber across your 10 years as an investor and perhaps your cognizance of it prior to that as well. It's certainly a category with a lot of spending resilience, so to say, within enterprises, unfortunately, given the necessity for to remain steadfast against attackers. And those attackers themselves are quite innovative and able to leverage many of the other tech trends and important innovations that are happening in technology as well. Give us sort of a brief lay of the land, if you would, from a macro perspective.
Of course, I would say cyber is one of the key areas of investment for Accel over the past years. I think at this point we have more than 40 portfolio companies in cyber, primarily centered across the Valley and Israel, but not only. It's been also one of the most, as you say, resilient spend areas in IT, and by no accident, right? You have increasingly sophisticated attackers, especially as you think of the rising importance of state actors. The architectures these attackers find are increasingly complex, spanning on-prem as well as cloud environments. And we all know that cloud has become incredibly distributed and increasingly more challenging to get a holistic view of, as well as the changing nature of work, right? Where now, everyone just doesn't sit in one or two offices, right? But you have remote workers, you have increasing use of contractors, third-party vendors. So if you think of the broader perimeter of the organization, that's become much faster. And lastly, I would mention AI. It's top of mind for many IT buyers at the moment, and also for us. It's creating a lot of opportunities and challenges for CISOs. Definitely, it's making attackers potentially more impactful, but there's also a lot of opportunity for improvement of the existing security tool set with AI.
Yeah, and you've mentioned a past conversation that you and I had that it's a category where the bleeding edge is very important, and as you noted, innovation, the bad actors are themselves very innovative, which requires then countering that with increased innovation as well. Can you talk a bit about, you mentioned artificial intelligence, and obviously a topic of great relevance for reasons of opportunity, but also for reasons of defense for large organizations. Talk a bit about the importance of AI a bit more, if you would, within the context of cyber.
It's a very hot topic at the moment because AI is making it easier to exploit humans, right? If you think of much more sophisticated phishing attacks or potentially using deep fakes, right, as we've seen with MGM lately, as well as it is making it easier to exploit vulnerabilities. We can deploy much more automation to automatically map an IT environment, for example. That being said, it's also giving a lot of opportunity to CISOs to really step up their posture as well as remediation game, and across many areas, right? One, let's say natural one would be around data loss prevention, DLP, as well as email security. Think of applying much more sophisticated techniques to detect malicious inbound emails, for example, right? And you can have a much higher accuracy if you deploy AI at scale, as opposed to rule-based systems or simple machine learning. Other domains I would count as important include issue prioritization or alert triage, right? As CISOs know, you have an increasingly vast array of tools, each spitting a lot of alerts at increasingly faster pace. It would be nice to use AI to prioritize alerts as well as triangulate alerts that span multiple systems and could potentially give you a better picture of a sophisticated attacks. And lastly, I would call out automatic remediation, right? And that can take the form of automating the work of a security analyst, as well as automating some of the fixes that go in your code development process, right? In terms of automated code fixes or actually trying to, let's say, assist the workflow that has to do with remediation post-alert.
So you mentioned visibility, productization, and remediation as portions of the value chain, and as you've noted, each of them areas of focus for you. I wonder if you can, as we maybe we can roll back through each of the three again, and you can talk a bit about, if you don't mind, the kinds of companies that excite you in each of those spaces as well. Maybe beginning with visibility.
Yeah, of course. Yes, on the visibility side, it's what makes it interesting is that there are way more potential attack vectors these days, and you have to have an increasingly sophisticated security posture. One attack vector we keep reading and hearing on and on is identity, as the most challenging attack vector from, let's say, a number of angles, right? Where you have an increasing rise of third-party vendors. You have, and we've seen the example of Snowflake lately, right? You have many overprivileged accounts, right? And this can be employees that were given access to a sensitive resource once, and then someone forgot to turn that off. You have former employees. You have just kind of poorer security practices overall. We see some of the basics around multi-factor authentication. They're just not rolled out or properly managed across the org. So this makes identity risks particularly challenging. We've seen a lot of promising in an emerging area of identity, namely non-human identity. And here we back a company called Oasis Security. And non-human identity, think of it as a much bigger but much more opaque world compared to the human identity side. And by humans, think of managing employee access, but non-humans, think of all the API keys you have, service accounts, any bot or kind of automation that accesses some resource in the background. And in general, we see that both IT as well as security teams don't have an idea really how big their NHI footprint really is. And Oasis offers just that, right? A visibility off the bat enables you to improve your posture as you know what's at risk, but then over time improves the governance of non-human identities, as well as provides solutions for remediation, right? When it comes to certain code changes or better hygiene in key rotation. So that I would call the identity side. Another, let's say, area of security we've been focused on is data security. And if you think of traditional data security was very much kind of handled in an on-prem world. These days, you have data living in many types of repositories, right? On-prem, cloud, your own warehouse, kind of third-party warehouses, and third-party vendors. And you also use that data in many more ways, right? Where it's that data may be used for analytics purposes, maybe fed into AI, you may be training yourself, you may be fed into some kind of product feature, such as kind of, let's say, real-time risk decisioning. So you have to have a real understanding of what data you have, who has access to it, and how you plan to govern it. So we backed a company called Cyera here, which gives you that full visibility of data sitting across your kind of overall enterprise. Enables you to classify it, properly govern it, as well as provides the right tools to detect issues and remediate them.
I wonder if you could talk a bit about the role that regulation is playing. We're seeing increased regulation in numerous places, including places of nations, as well as, for example, here in the United States, different states of the U.S. Talk a bit about the role that plays and the necessity and perhaps opportunity even for companies you invest in to remain abreast of those regulations and take advantage of them.
Of course. So regulation is impactful across a number of topics. One of it is what I mentioned is data security, right? Where you have to be very conscious of, for example, the use of PII across your org. And I wish there was one single way to manage such a threat, but there's not, right? And even if you think of something very topical right now, take the example of a product team training an internal bot, right, on your kind of analytics, on your analytical database to improve, let's say, marketing insights or finance insights. The folks in the finance team should have a different level of visibility if you ask what the compensation is for this employee versus someone in the marketing team, right? But they may be training that algorithm on the same data set. So having a deep view in this case of privacy data engineering and being thoughtful of, even if you anonymize it, kind of what data gets fed to whom and ultimately who will be the consumers is really important. So we're spending a lot of time thinking of let's say, kind of protection of the source and having a proper, let's say, proper controls in terms of your data structures before things can get out of hand on the consumption side. So data is one. There are other risks. For example, when we think of AML, and we've seen this with a number of companies touching real money. Right, where I would say the fines you get for potential breaches can be increasingly large. So we're seeing companies, and this is more of a market commentary, companies that were all about speed and gathering assets and growing at all scale, at all costs during the heydays of 2021, now pressing the brakes a bit, being much more thoughtful around having the proper compliance processes to make sure they're really getting the right business. They have proper controls in place.
We talked about artificial intelligence and by connection to that, generative artificial intelligence. There is rightfully a lot of concern about the security aspects of generative AI, whether it's the bad actors' ability to leverage it, whether it's the broader exposure of IP within an organization to put in places that it shouldn't be. I wonder, how optimistic are you that generative AI is the pathway to overcome the issues, potential cybersecurity issues with generative AI will be solved with generative AI?
Interesting. Well, I think the issue will have to be tackled at various points in the value chain. I think first it starts with the model providers, right? Where also being driven by regulation, right? Especially because of what's coming out of Europe. I think there will be a certain, let's say, degree of controls each model provider will have to offer. And I think it's to be seen how, as a side point, how easy that will be for some of the open source providers, right? Where licensing aside, you may not have full control over how that code gets used to potentially generate a malicious agent. But overall, I see them all providers trying to own the problem a bit more in terms of making sure, particularly if you deploy such a model on-prem, you can have the right approvals, right controls in terms of what data you feed that model with, and along the way, making sure that outputs which should stay sensitive are really sensitive, and there's some degree of filtering that comes up with exposing sensitive data. Many companies will definitely want to boost their security posture with their own tool set, and we're seeing a number of companies emerge in this field around problem security, because you can rely on the model to be, let's say, well behaved in normal circumstances, but you can control a malicious employee trying to exploit any corner case to potentially get access to sensitive data, or even a non-malicious way. We've seen many situations of data loss where employees simply put sensitive data into the prompts, right? And again, this may pose a regulatory risk if that data goes to OpenAI or one of the other vendors and leaves the company premises. So in general, I think we'll see much more control from both the mall providers as well as the enterprises in terms of what gets passed along, both in terms of training data as well as outputs.
And what do you look for in a founder whose company you invest in?
That's a big topic, right? And it's I wish there was a simple answer, because that would make our job so much easier. Personally, and that answer is also very personal to each partner, right? And we all seek common tenets in terms of real ambition, insight. Personally, what I love is relentlessness. I think in every founder I back, because building a startup takes a lot of hard work, and it's not an up and to the right journey. So one's ability to be resilient and focused on the long-term goal is very important. Particularly in cyber, we backed a number of archetypes of teams, I would say. You have teams such as Snyk, for example, right, where Gaipo and his co-founders were experienced security executives. They had built successful companies before. So when we discussed with them about backing Snyk, the team felt like a no-brainer one to back. If we look at the other end of the spectrum, the teams at the Sierra or Oasis were very much super ambitious green teams coming out of the military units. And in these cases, we rely a lot on our assessment of them as individual and the values they have. And I say there, it's much more bet on their potential as opposed to a very padded resume.
And the ultimate customer of many of your companies is the CISO. You've mentioned that before, the Chief Information Security Officer. Talk about the complexity of that role these days. It seems as though there are numerous instances where one is personally liable. The risk associated with taking it on, the reward as well. It's a highly in demand position, and great CISOs can do phenomenally well across enterprises. But talk a bit about the evolution of the role as someone who's had reason to think about them and interact with them for more than a decade now.
Of course, I would say many CISOs are instrumental in enabling the whole ecosystem to flourish, and I would commend some of the CISOs we've worked with in terms of their willingness to embrace new technologies and always jumping on a call to learn about a promising company. Unlike other enterprise buyers where the focus is much more on cost or tool consolidation, as a CISO, you have to be on your front foot to think of kind of what's out there, what's the potential you may have, a potential hole you may have in your security posture. So it's crucial to keep yourself fresh and learn of really the latest technologies and companies. It's also an interesting role in that, and I think that comes with cyber purchasing decisions in general. It's a very top-down process, buying a cyber solution, right? Because it's, in general, cyber is bought and used top-down. There's also a strong bet on, it's more of a strategic purchase decision. You kind of have to think of each solution in the broader context. And this makes selling security not just a technical sale, but also sometimes a political sale where you have to navigate certain certain priorities, and sometimes there may be misalignment between the security team and IT teams. And CISO can be a gatekeeper, but also an enabler of for many of these early stage companies to get into the enterprise. It's been an increasingly important role, as you say. Yeah, personally, we have been fortunate as a firm to have many CISOs in our network who've been early adopters of security tools. So we're both evaluating it as well as backed.
Yeah, phenomenal. I want to talk a bit about your journey. You are Romanian. You came to the U.S. for university at Princeton. You have a business school degree from Harvard Business School. You've worked for many years here in the U.S. now, of course, as you noted, based in London, with Europe and Israel as areas of focus. As you think about your journey, I wonder what have been some of the difference makers along the way that have been some of the secrets to your success?
Oh, I think I'm still writing my story, so there are many years ahead of me. On my side, it's been, I guess some of the things I look for in founders, I probably emulated or kind of experienced myself. I grew up studying math as a kid, and I would say math has been a core part of my childhood for as far as I remember. And I would say Princeton was my lottery ticket. I applied to 36 universities. I was looking for a scholarship. They were, let's say, kind enough to give me that chance, and I took it. That was my first flight ever. I landed in the US. Took me a bit of time to figure out that Princeton is not really representative of the US, but I had a great time there. That's where I met my wife, and we ended up spending a decade on the East Coast. I've only worked in US work environments as a result, and I count Accel as part of that. And I've loved the sense of urgency, sense of ambition, a collaborative and open culture you get in many places in the US, as well as I call the technology bug, right? And it's, once you see the pace at which great teams and individuals can build amazing software and amazing innovations, I think it's very hard to go back from that. The move back to Europe was partly family driven, partly Accel driven, partly opportunistic, right? Where I met my colleagues at Accel, and I thought, hey, this is the team I want to work with. We also wanted to be closer to families, but more importantly, I saw the opportunity in Europe where 10 years back, things were much quieter here, right? And I think there was still a big gap in terms of the pace of ambition and innovation you would have in the Valley versus the rest of the world. Now, there has been much more convergence, right? And when we meet a founder in Munich, when they talk about their role models, they talk about role models they see in the States or other global companies we've backed. And it's been really exciting to see how both skills as well as the bar founders set for themselves have really up-leveled. I find these days the founders we back from this side of the ocean still want to play in the big leagues, which makes me very excited.
Yeah, I can understand that, certainly. In your business, you need to remain current on trends and the evolution of business in the various lanes that you cover. What do you read, listen to, and watch to remain current, Andrei?
For sure. It's, as you say, being current is really important. I would double that with trying to develop a differentiated point of view, where it's also easy to fall into the trap of reading the same things or listening to the same things as everyone else. And being a good investor relies to some extent on also having a differentiated or somewhat contrarian view. On my side, listen, there's a privilege of meeting a lot of founders day to day, right? Where it's hundreds of companies a year. So you naturally end up learning about a lot of new technologies and new parts of the market. So that keeps me constantly up to date. There are certain, I would say, podcasts I listen to or folks I follow, primarily focus on more technical understanding of topics, right? And it's, if I think of these areas I cover, they build themselves over time, right? There's no shortcut to understanding a technical domain rather than being a practitioner to some extent and then learning brick by brick over the years.
Well, Andrei, thank you so much for a fascinating conversation and sharing some of your wisdom from your more than a decade as an investor and multiple decades as a business leader. It's been fascinating to hear from you, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks so much, Peter, for the invitation and great discussion.